We get more from the Washington Post reporter who broke both of these stories, Carol Leonnig. Carol, thank you for being with us again. So, new information about this man who jumped the fence last week and got into the White House, and now it turns out farther than anybody thought.
Yes, people have been making jokes today that he went in and made himself a sandwich. It's really disconcerting, but some sources who've come to us and some whistleblowers who have come to Congressman Chaffetz have recounted something more serious about this security breach about 10 days ago. Omar Gonzalez apparently not only made it to the front door and opened it, he made it past the guard who was stationed inside that area and into the East Room. Most members of the public haven't seen the East Room except on television or on the internet, but it's the ornate, elaborate room that the president uses for addresses and receptions. And this person was tackled there after making it all the way to the south end of that 80-foot-long room. This suggests that he had a lot of opportunities to be close to other people in the House. And as you all know, the president and his daughters had just lifted off in their helicopter at that point from the South Lawn when Omar Gonzalez made a break for it on the North Lawn and got in the House.
So, Carol, this means yet another layer of Secret Service protection was breached.
Yes, and I'm glad you bring up the layers. So we wrote a story probably about a week ago that was about the 5 security layers that former agents had highlighted for us. And they said, it's just amazing that the successive layers would be breached. First, the counter-surveillance guys on the outside that are supposed to see suspicious activity and jumpers. Then the uniformed division officers who are supposed to be able to collar that person. Then the canine dog who's supposed to be released so that that dog can basically act like a missile and knock down an intruder. Then fourth, a SWAT team that's on the grounds able to respond to a crisis. And then fifth, the uniformed division officer who's supposed to be posted on the outside at the door at all times. All of those we know failed. However, what we didn't know until today with the account that is spooling out to us was that there was another Secret Service officer posted inside who appeared to be caught unaware that there was an intruder coming her way and about to burst through the door. And when she was caught unaware, though she tried to collar him, according to these sources, he overpowered her and barreled past her and into really the heart of the ceremonial White House.
And this just raises all sorts of new questions. So, Carol, I also want to ask you about the story you broke over the weekend, this incident in 2011. It was known that there was a shooting. The man behind it went to prison for 25 years. What was not known was how much the Secret Service botched this. What exactly went wrong?
I think of this story sort of in 3 parts. A lot of what went wrong was from an investigative standpoint. So as you have already well described, this shooter pulled out a semi-automatic rifle, pointed it at the White House while he was parked on Constitution Avenue, and struck the residence of the Obamas 7 times, 2 of them going into the windows of a living room that Michelle Obama has described as one of her favorite rooms. Michelle and the president were not at home at this time, but Sasha was at home, their youngest daughter. Mother-in-law Marion Robinson was there, and Malia, their oldest daughter, was on her way home. But what happened was the Secret Service leadership decided that it was very unlikely that the shooter, the gunshots that were heard, were aimed at the White House. They thought that was likely impossible that somebody could shoot that far. And they deduced that instead 2 gangsters were shooting at each other. They found an abandoned car very soon after the gunfire was heard on the South Lawn, abandoned and crashed. Inside it was this knockoff semi-automatic knockoff AK-47. And again, they deduced this was one of the gangsters' cars. But what they didn't investigate very fully was the evidence of damage that was very clear on the outside of the White House and on the Truman balcony. And also, most importantly, they didn't focus on their own staff on the grounds that night. there is an officer named Carrie Johnson who told FBI agents later that she was underneath the Truman balcony and readied a shotgun when she heard gunfire. She thought an attack was coming over the south lawn. She heard debris falling over her head from the balcony. You know, these are all those red flags of, wow, maybe something hit the White House. But she, you know, was afraid to counter her bosses who said to her, we've investigated this and concluded it's something else.
Well, two questions very quickly then. What does that say about what's the way the Secret Service is run, number one, and we know it was under a different director then, and number two, has all this been fixed today?
Well, as for the, you know, what are the symptoms, what do these things indicate? Carrie Johnson didn't feel comfortable rebutting her boss's narrative. Officers on the Secret Service and leadership that night, that Friday night, rushed to a hasty conclusion and didn't look very hard and didn't ask very many questions. So it almost seems like, you know, some of the complaints that we've heard over the last several months that the agency's a little too complacent, that it hasn't had a serious attack or assassination attempt, and thus is sort of starting to get lulled to sleep. That's one thing that a worry that is raised. Second, that it's a top-down leadership culture where, you know, you better toe the line and don't mess with our thought process about what happened here. That certainly looks like it was Carrie Johnson's experience.
Well, it is an extraordinary story and two extraordinary examples of reporting. We thank you very much. And the other part of it we didn't even have time to talk about is the anger on the part of the President and the First Lady after this incident in 2011. Again, great reporting, Carol Leonnig of the Washington Post.
Thank you, Judy.